everyone, welcome. I'm Colette and today I want to do some book reviews. So I like to share a small snippet or two of information from each book if the book lends itself to that, so that you can actually learn something as well as getting a review of the book. I hope you enjoy. All right, everyone, let's jump in. Our first book is The Psychic Tarot by Auryn. Let's see if I can get that to not be too glary. I think I've got it there. Okay, so some of you know him from his book Psychic Witch, which is a really famous and great book. And Matt comes from a much more ceremonial tradition than I do. I'm a little more ecstatic, a little more folk magic-y, a little bit more green witchy. But I always find his information really, really useful. And to me, that's the mark of an incredible author, is when you can use their information no matter what kind of practice you have. And so one of the first things I like is that he consecrates this book to the spirits and guides that he works with. And that tells me a lot about whether someone is an actual practitioner or they just pulled some information off the internet, threw it together, and called it good. Even in the introduction, I feel like he gives really solid insight. So for example, when he's at a conference, I believe, he's asked whether he's reading the cards or whether he's just being psychic. And he says that tarot uses both for him, though he leans more towards psychic awareness and intuition. In chapter 1, he talks about the concept of the three souls, which shows up in many traditions, including the Celtic three cauldrons and in therapy with younger self, etc., etc. So there are a lot of different traditions that use that, and I feel like it can be a very useful concept in witchcraft to work with in your practice. He defines the lower self as our animal nature and survival instincts, which I find that animal body and what he describes as the lower self is often one of the things that picks up on information before our brains do. The middle self is our reasoning and cognition, your editing brain in other words, and the upper self as a divine essence that remains unchanged through lifetimes. What I appreciate is he treats all three of these as sacred, which is the way I work with various parts of myself when I work with witchcraft. And that's unlike some Christian or New Age views. He sees them as equally important to your spiritual life, that the lower self is not actually your lower vibration. I'm still reading this one, but it's packed with 78 exercises and techniques for witches and occultists, as well as tons of written material. He has things in his exercises like the Triple Soul Pledge and spreads for insights and connecting energy. And he covers entering different brainwave states, storing power, and even how to know when to stop shuffling. He also includes sections on pendulums, automatic writing, finding a tarot spirit guide, and working with birth and year cards, which is a practice I've been using for decades and I really love. If you haven't tried it before, it's really worth checking out. So if you're interested in divination or tarot, I highly recommend this one. I'd put it right up there with Mary Greer's Tarot for Yourself, which is a book I've used reliably for decades. The next book is the Encyclopedia of Norse and Germanic Folklore, Mythology, and Magic by Claude Lecouteux. And I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name. It's not a how-to book. It's much more scholarly than that. So you might not enjoy that aspect of it as a more advanced witch. I find that really, really helpful. But if you have Norse, Germanic, or English ancestry, it's really incredibly useful. It offers definitions, history of deities, magical beings, rituals, and folklore. And because it's written by a medieval literature professor who's deeply knowledgeable about paganism and folk magic, it's grounded in real sources rather than modern inventions. Now, I'm someone who believes modern inventions are fine. Practices evolve. That's okay, but I like to know the difference. And as far as I know, he's not associated with any white supremacist ideology, which is surprisingly rare in this particular ethnicity of books. He cites his sources and summarizes a lot of the famous mythologies really well. It's a great reference, and I think it's fun to just open at random and read a section or two. For example, I opened the book to Hrimthurs, probably butchering that. They're frost giants, some of the oldest beings in the world. I didn't know that. Their names come from words like snow, cold, and ice, and they're shapeshifters. They know magic, and they hold all of the world's secrets, and they are the original inhabitants of the world. I love that, and I'd like to explore working with them a little bit on some of our rarer snowy days or when I'm up on the mountain and see what that's like. He also includes deities that aren't often talked about, like Nahalania, who's associated with abundance, the dead, often shown with a dog and in a ship. And Nerthus, the earth goddess who travels in a consecrated wagon, and when she appears in a town, all work and war stop for days of celebration, followed by ritual cleansing in a sacred lake, after which she disappears again. She may later have been seen as male or double-gendered, and when I see references to double-gendered deities, I love finding that because a lot of that information has been really suppressed. If you're drawn to Norse or Germanic folk magic, this book is indispensable. You can even use it for divination for working with spirits. Open it to a page, use a pendulum, or see which being calls to you. I want to say that is a little bit more intermediate though, since it takes some skill to work with spirits that you don't know. And my final book is Muse Mysteria by J. Wells Karra. And it's book 1 in a series that's still unfolding, and I think book 2 is being worked on right now. It's a mix of history, poetry, and initiation story about the Muses, telling their individual stories, talking about how they came to hold the powers that they hold. And the Muses are 9 powerful Greek goddesses who embody creativity. And as a writer and a content creator, I love getting a really solid introduction to them in a way that was easy to take in and enjoyable to read. Their names are Cleo, Muse of the Past and Wisdom; Melpomene, probably butchering that name, Muse of Tragedy; Erato, Muse of Erotic Poetry and Romance; Euterpe, Muse of Music; Terpsichore, Muse of Dance; Thalia, Muse of Comedy; Calliope, Muse of Epic Poetry and Storytelling; Polhemnia, Muse of Sacred Song and Devotion; and Urania, Muse of Astrology and Prophecy. I love that she includes ancient writings like a hymn from Syria dated to 1400 BC that is one of the earliest written music pieces that we know about, as well as her own inspired poetry that she received from the Muses. The author says the Muses guided her to write this book, and again, I really love that. It's great to read books from solid practitioners, and I love that she's clear about what's historical and what she wrote down as fictional parts. Okay, everyone, let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books and have opinions about them, or if there are books you'd like me to review in the future. I appreciate you liking, subscribing, and checking the description for links to my latest blog articles and to sign up for my newsletter. I think there's going to be 2 or 3 new blog articles by the time this comes out, maybe one on hedge witchery, a couple other topics that I haven't quite decided on yet. So until next time, stay safe and be well.